Welcome back, guys. So I finished off the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, and really enjoyed, for the most part, rewatching all three of those movies. And I needed to talk about, next up, I need to talk about the Amazing Spider-Man films, 1 and 2, the two films that are now really out of place because they didn't even make it to a third film because Sony is so ignorant when it comes to making a franchise, destroying it, and just starting from scratch again. And they went to Marvel for the now Spider-Man. So, The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, love them or hate them, they're really interesting films just because they were made and now they're completely forgotten and erased. And they're not like the Sam Raimi films with Tobey Maguire because those were the ones that started Spider-Man. So it's weird seeing these ones are going to be forgotten pretty easily, and it's unfortunate because honestly, I love the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. I think this is a great Spider-Man movie. I think that in terms of being, it's really close to the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man in terms of the plot, in terms of how I feel about it. I feel like this is a tad under the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man, but I do actually really love this movie. I really do enjoy this movie a lot. I love the fact that it's like it's the same movie as Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1, but it's also very different because this movie elaborates on Peter and his childhood, his parents. It doesn't tell the whole story until the second one, but it's about Peter losing his parents, living with his aunt and uncle, while investigating, finding a villain that connects to his parents, Kurt Connors. So I really liked all these story additions to this one to make it a soft reboot of the first Spider-Man film. So I really did enjoy that a lot. And I gotta say that one of the best things too about the movie is Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. These two characters, specifically in both of these movies, honestly, I'd take over Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst. And I do love Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst in their movies. I think they're great in their movies. But in terms of sincerity and in terms of realism, I felt like these two performances together in both of these movies were incredible. I feel like they've got incredible chemistry. I feel like they've got such great emotion. You care so much about these two characters, Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. And because they were a couple in real life, it really feels like they bring such heart to this movie and such a sincerity and a realness to it. And I really love these two performances. I think that they are, I don't want to say underrated because people do like them a lot, but I feel like they're underrated in the grand scheme of like the Spider-Man films. Like people immediately dismiss these movies, which I don't understand. I mean, I understand in a lot of ways the second one, but in the first one, I don't understand why this one gets that much ridicule, because there are a lot of things that I love about this movie, including their chemistry and their performances. Their performances are fantastic. I also really like the addition of Sally Field and Martin Sheen as Aunt May and Uncle Ben. They are really, really good. They have as much time as they do in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, but I felt like in this one they bring something else to the role. They act different in a way where they stand out. I think they both stand out in this movie. And they're just as good as like Rosemary Harris and Cliff Robertson in the first Spider-Man movie. And I also like Dennis Leary as Captain Stacy. I thought that was a cool character who is a foil for Spider-Man, even though at the end of the movie he stops being a foil to him. He helps him out and loses his life because of that. But I like the fact that this character is kind of like how J. Jonah Jameson is like in the first three Spider-Man movies, where he's the one against Spider-Man, against this hero who's a vigilante. So like he takes over the place of J. Jonah Jameson in this and is like the character who can't stand Peter Parker, but by the end has a change of heart in a really cool way. So I really liked him. And Dennis Leary, I think, barely does any movies now, so it's funny to see him in this movie. He didn't do a movie in a long time, like 5 or 10 years until this movie came out. So that's really funny, and that's cool that he came back for this, because I thought he did a really good job in this movie. And Dr. Connors, Reese Ifans plays him, if I pronounce his name right. He is really cool as Dr. Connors, as this villain who isn't the best Spider-Man villain, but he's up there though. I feel like he's middle road in terms of the Spider-Man villains. Like I think that he has a Doc Ock type of personality where he kind of gets taken over by his lizard personality because he becomes the lizard and his ambitions and thoughts overtake him and make him a villain where he wants to turn everybody into lizards because he thinks that it's a logical step in the evolutionary chain and a reasoning to make not anybody an outcast, not make anybody made fun of being outcast. And I like how that connects to Peter Parker too, who is an outcast kind of in a way in this movie. Not as much as Tobey Maguire, but still he works. And I also liked how this tried to be more comic book accurate. And I know it's like little things that don't really matter, but I thought that was cool in this movie that he has organic web shooters. Like he doesn't, even though it's fine in these Tobey Maguire ones, but in the Tobey Maguire ones it comes out of his skin literally whenever he does this. In this, he has the organic web shooters, and I think that's a really cool way of showing how much of a smart kid Peter Parker is in this movie. Like he really is a genius kid, and I like how it shows off more of him being smart and creative with making the suit, with having a homemade suit. I like the suit in this movie too. A lot of people rip on it because it's not the Spider-Man suit typical like in the Tobey Maguire ones or in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 or even Spider-Man in the Marvel universe and the MCU. But I feel like this is a cool outfit because it is an outfit made by a kid. Like this is his first time making an outfit. It's not like it kind of makes it seem more unrealistic in the Tobey Maguire ones that he immediately gets the coolest looking suit ever in all three of them and makes it and doesn't switch out. In Amazing Spider-Man 2, he switches out to the better suit, but he took this whole first movie to make a suit that is adequate enough, and I like how it looks. I like the design of it because it's a homemade suit. I think that's a really creative idea, just in terms of using it for this movie. This one movie alone. And I liked how it also included Gwen Stacy being his first love. Even though Liz Allen, I think, was his first love, or Betty Brant in the comics, but Gwen Stacy was his first big love, Peter Parker. And I like how they started with that instead of Mary Jane in the Tobey Maguire ones. That's cool that they started with Gwen Stacy. And like I said with the plot, it's a little like Raimi's film with a few alterations, like the parents' angle, them being missing, Peter longing to be with them, longing to know what happened to them. And the villain is a lizard instead of the goblin, but his story kind of goes the same way. Except for he is redeemed at the end. He isn't like the goblin in the first Spider-Man movie where he isn't redeemed by the end. He's just killed. In this one, I like how the lizard survives, and it would have been interesting to see if this Amazing Spider-Man series went along after the second one, if the lizard came back, because he was not in the second one. So that would have been interesting to see him come back, because the after credits scene in this movie implied it so, but we never got that. And going on to just a couple of scenes that I really like in the movie. I love the scene where Peter humiliates Flash. And Uncle Ben tells him about, you must feel really good about this. You must really feel really good about embarrassing this boy. And Peter just says, like, he deserves it. Like, I thought he deserved it. And I love how Uncle Ben just says to him, like, whether or not he deserved it or not, that's not the right way to go. That's not the right way to treat a person, whether they treated you bad in the first place or not. And I really like that scene between them both after Peter gets in trouble for breaking the headboard on the basketball hoop, and I think that it's just a really good scene between them both. Just it builds on Peter becoming like how it was in the first Raimi Spider-Man, where like he beats up Flash too, but I like how it's kind of different. It's not the exact same, but it is, and I like how they do make it so close to the other one, but it still works really well with that scene of them talking about if he deserved it or not, if Flash deserved to be embarrassed or not. I enjoyed that a lot. And then I really enjoy the scene where Uncle Ben and Peter have the argument before Uncle Ben's death, where like he's talking, or Uncle Ben is truly telling him like, because he left Aunt May to walk home 12 blocks in the dark in the middle of the night because he was busy with Dr. Connors trying to figure out more about his parents, trying to learn what Dr. Connors was doing. So Peter made a bad move, and I like how it's a really good moment, just a character moment between Uncle Ben and Peter, and like how Uncle Ben is ashamed of him, and like Peter brings out the fact that like his parents aren't there, and why couldn't my dad come and tell me this himself? And I like that a lot. I think that's a great moment, and it's a great, good moment that's final, where like right after this, Uncle Ben is killed. So I like how that it ends like the first one, where like both Peters in both films have a bad argument with Uncle Ben, and then he dies afterward. Like I like how there's that sadness of not getting a good conversation with Uncle Ben right before he goes. I like that a lot. And I love how Peter then goes and like the other movie, like he tries to become Spider-Man, like he trains. He doesn't do exactly the same thing. He just runs around the city and like beats up people who are beating up other people. And I love the fact that while this is happening, Aunt May like sees all these bruises on him, and there's this amazing scene where like she's talking to him and she's like, Peter, where do you go? Who does this to you? And like he's got bruises all over his face, and he just says, go to sleep, Aunt May. And she's like, please tell me. And he says, go to sleep, Aunt May. And she goes, I can't sleep. Don't you understand? I can't sleep. And then she almost says, because like she was gonna probably talk about Uncle Ben because Uncle Ben's gone. And that's a great moment with Sally Field is great in this movie, and I love that this moment in particular where she's talking to Peter and she goes, Peter, secrets have a cost. They're not for free. Not now, not ever. And she just like cries at him, and like you could tell how horrible she is, what she is going through, and what Peter's going through, and how differently they are resolving this issue. Because Aunt May is just at home moping around, rightfully so, that her husband is dead, but like Peter goes out and fights to find his uncle's killer. And doesn't realize who the killer is, by the way, in this film or in the other film. So I really like that a lot. That's a great scene between them both. Like it's just a great acting moment. And then as the movie goes along, it's just like Peter with Dr. Connors gaining like kind of a friendship. And I like how these two characters, the hero and the villain, do have a more like, it's like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, where like him and Doc Ock have like a connection and really do talk a lot and have a lot of conversations before he becomes the villain. In this one I like that too, because Dr. Connors is the same thing with Peter, where they both gain like a friendship because they both don't understand what happened to Peter's parents, and like he's helping Peter out and Peter's helping him out. And it's just a really cool way of upping the villain and even though he's not a real villain, he's a villain in his own mind, but like he's not truly a villain. But I like how whenever Kurt Connors turns into the Lizard, and there's a great, like for the first time he turns into the Lizard, and there's a great scene at the bridge where like he is like throwing cars off of the bridge, and is it the Washington Bridge? I don't know. I'm not good at like, I can't remember which bridge it is, but he's throwing off cars off the bridge with people in it, and like Peter Parker saves all these cars, like webs them up to where they're hooked on the edge of the bridge. And there's a great scene where like a dad screaming like, my kid is stuck, he's stuck in my car, and Peter goes down into the web, the web hooked onto the car down behind the bridge, goes into it, and it's starting to catch on fire, and the kid's screaming, help, help. And then Peter, wearing the mask, comes in and says, I'll help you. And then the kid gets more frantic and more screaming. And then what Peter does, and this is a fantastic scene, he takes off his mask and he says, hey, I'm just like you. Put on the mask. It'll make you feel brave. It'll make you feel tough. And the kid puts on the mask, and the kid comes out of the car right before it lights on fire. And then Peter grabs him. He almost drops him, but he webs him and pulls him up and saves the kid. And it just, in terms of like Peter having no parents in this movie, it's great. It's a great moment for him becoming a true hero, because he saves this kid. The dad cries with the kid in his arms saying, my son. And like Peter, like he says to Peter, like, who are you? And Peter says, I'm Spider-Man. But like, that's a great moment in terms of Peter not having any parents, saving this kid to have his for his dad to see another day. Like, it's cool how this character in this movie has no parents, but he takes that rightful duty and like saves his kid, and it takes him to his father. So it's like Peter, it's metaphorically speaking that Peter wants to see his father. Peter wants to be with his father, and I love that moment where that makes him the hero. That truly is the moment where he says, "I'm Spider-Man" for the first time, and he says he's a true hero. I think that's great. That's a great moment, like incredible moment. I love that scene. And the action scenes are good in the movie overall, but like they kind of, they're more realistic, quote unquote, than the Sam Raimi ones. But they're good, but they're more plain. Like, they're not like bad. They're just kind of like I mean, I do really love these scenes. Like, I love the scene at the bridge. I like the scene at the school. The fight at the school is really cool. You got a great Stan Lee cameo in that scene. So I like that scene, that fight at the school, and I like the ending fight, which I'll get into more in a minute. But I also love the fact that George Stacy, Captain Stacy, Gwen Stacy's father, has a vendetta against Spider-Man, hates him because he's a vigilante. He doesn't want him to take over take over the city and try to save all these people because it's not his right, he thinks. And I like how Peter, by the end of the movie, like, Stacy captures Spider-Man and realizes that it's Peter. And I like that he, along with Gwen Stacy, realizes that Peter is Spider-Man. And it's a really good moment whenever George Stacy realizes it. I love the moment too whenever Gwen realizes it too. Like, whenever they have that dance on, or not a dance, but like he spins her around with a web on the balcony at the Stacy's house. But like, I love how both of these characters, both of the Stacys, realize that Peter's Spider-Man in this, and George Stacy loses his life because of that, which is sad. But I like how George Stacy, before he dies, becomes Spider-Man's ally, and he helps him out. And I like how he helps him buy time for the Lizard, and I liked how this moment where after like Peter's been shot, and like Captain Stacy like tells him to go, and like then it shows these guys working on cranes, and the city's being shut down. But then this guy, who's the guy who Peter saved his kid earlier, realizes Spider-Man needs help. He's limping. He's struggling to get all the way to Oscorp. This guy whose kid was saved, he goes and makes all the cranes land perfectly, like placed perfectly to where Peter goes building to building. And that moment with the score, with Peter limping then running, is one of the most epic superhero moments I think in any superhero movie, where Peter like webs up his wound that he gets shot at. He sees the distance he has to go to run and jump, and all the cranes are placed in his favor because of what he did earlier for that guy with his kid. And that moment with the music is just epic, and him running, him finally getting all the way to Oscorp is really moving and really incredibly touching. One of my favorite moments in any superhero movie ever. It gives me goosebumps. It's that good. And I love how Oscorp is the location for the climax, and I love how this movie revolves around Oscorp in terms of everything evil is going on in Oscorp, and it connects to The Amazing Spider-Man 2 as well. But in this one, it's just Kurt Connors goes to Oscorp, gets the Ganali device, which is the thing that's going to turn everybody into Lizard. It's got to go take a beam into the sky. He's got to do it while Gwen creates an antidote, and Peter fights him on the roof. And it's such a cool location, and the Oscorp design, and this is really cool. In the Sam Raimi one, it was just pretty plain, but this is a really cool tower, and they described it, whenever this movie was coming out, they described it as a Tower of Babel, like with a madman up at the very top. I thought that was a really cool description of like this building that has so many secrets and so many villains lying in it, that I really wish we could have seen what would have happened in this universe after the second one, since we got this franchise canceled. But whatever. But anyway, the fight on the roof, I think, is really thrilling, where Peter has to go up and like stop the device from going off while the Lizard keeps getting him, or trying to pull him down. And the action and the score and everything works just perfectly in that moment where he's going up there. It's timed. It's about to go off. He puts in the antidote. Flies up. It turns Connors back to normal. It's just a great action scene. And then after that, like, since they're both on this antenna, it breaks off to where they're gonna both fall off of the building. The I don't know how many stories high building they're gonna fall off of it. Peter falls off the side. Connors grabs him with his arm that he doesn't have, with except for it's now his arm because he's the lizard. But then his arm starts deteriorating, and then he grabs him with the other arm, and it's a great little thrilling moment. And Kirk Connors pulls him up and realizes everything that he's done is wrong. Like everything that this character has done was in his mind trying to be something good. Like he was trying to save people. Like he was trying to make, like in his mind he wanted to have people all turn into lizards because then nobody would be outcast. Nobody would be like everybody would be themselves or be the same. So like he wouldn't have anybody that's an outcast. And I liked that thought of the villain character, but he's not truly a villain. And I love that moment where like he turns back to normal and he realizes that he killed Captain Stacy, and like Peter goes up to Captain Stacy, and this is a fantastic scene where Captain Stacy says to him like that like Spider-Man's gonna have enemies. Just promise me one thing: leave Gwen out of it. And then Peter doesn't say yes, but he just shakes his head, and then then George Stacy dies, and like dies right there. And it felt like this character went through so much in this movie, Peter Parker. Like he went through everything where he lost the girl that he loves. He in some ways killed him as well, with the lizard being released and being created. So incredible guilt is laid on Peter Parker, and that leads to the second movie. But I like how this one, it leads to such guilt of him losing Gwen's father and then not being at the funeral. And then there's a fantastic scene where where Gwen comes over to Peter's house at the end of the movie and says, "Where were you?" And he says, "What?" And she says, "It was a funeral. My father died. It was a funeral. They shot off rifles and they made speeches. Two of my teachers showed up. Flash showed up. Everyone was there but you." And then she just starts crying, and like it's just a fantastically acted moment between these two. And like I love how he just says like, "I can't do this. I can't do this." And she's like, What are you saying?" And he's just like, I can't be with you anymore." And you can tell with the performances that he's just so heartbroken saying that to her. Her reaction is so genuine too, and the score, the romantic theme is incredible, and just her walking down, putting the umbrella up and looking back at him and says, "He made you promise, didn't he, my father?" It's just an incredibly heartbreaking moment because they had such great chemistry and such great performances that whenever they don't get together at the end, it felt just as good as like in the original Spider-Man, where like Peter and Mary Jane didn't get together at the end of the movie. And it shows how good it is if like you care so much about these characters that they don't get together at the end, and they're just so, in both of those movies, like this one and the original Spider-Man, it's just so well done. And I love how Aunt May just looks like right behind him. Aunt May's just standing there while he's at the door like crying, and she just says like, "What a pretty girl." And then Peter just says, "Yeah, that's what Uncle Ben said," because he said that earlier in the movie. And she said, "Did you ask her out?" And he just goes, "No." Like he just starts shaking his head, and she goes, "Why?" And he just says, "I'm no good for her." And then she just looks at him and says, "Peter Parker, if you are anything at all, it is good. If anybody has a problem with that, you can talk to me, or they can talk to me." I love that moment. It's a great moment from Mary Jane, not Mary Jane, from Aunt May, just being a really loving person. And I love how that just really, again, this movie does a fantastic job of loving these characters. And I love the ending. I love Uncle Ben's final message on the phone, where like he's saying like to Peter, like it's the message that he gives him right before he dies, and Peter didn't answer it until now, or listen to it until now, his voicemail. And he says like, "Peter, I know things have been hard for you lately, and I apologize. I know you've been through so many unresolved things, but take it from an old man that these things take us through a path, and I love the fact that he talks about if anyone's fit for greatness, it's you, son. You just gotta understand how to hone your gifts and how to use your gifts. And I love you and come home. And it was just, I don't know, like it's just an incredible moment again. Like these, it's so endearing and just these characters are so good and so interesting and the performances are incredible. So God, I love this movie. And I love how at the very end, even though it is implied that they weren't going to get back together, of course they're going to get back together, but it just shows has Peter at school and like he's in a class and like he's late to school or late to class and the teacher says, well, at least we can count on you. And Peter says, sorry, it won't happen again. And she says to him, don't give promises you don't think you can keep. And then Peter just whispers to Gwen, yeah, but those are the best kind. And then she smiles. And then it shows this epic thing where, like in all these Spider-Man movies, where Peter Parker as Spider-Man just goes and dances in the sky, shoots his webs, flies all around the city. It is just moving. Just such a visually cool scene at the very last moment of the movie, where he shoots the web at the camera. That's so cool. And I just talking about this movie, it truly is one of my favorite superhero movies. I think that it is such a human movie. There's a review on Metacritic that, like, I think they gave it like 100 out of 100, and I was looking through the reviews for this movie, and it said, like, and I'm going to steal this from them, their quote said that this is a very human movie. The first second in the movie oozes human emotion and oozes and makes it feel like a true human hero. Like it feels like this is a very human piece, and I love that review. And I was paraphrasing what they said in that review, but it really is an incredibly human movie, and these characters are so interesting and so captivating and so emotionally interesting. Like they really are such characters that I care so much about, and I really do care about these characters more than the Sam Raimi ones, and I do love those movies, or the first two, and it's weird. It's a weird thing because this movie I think is incredible. I just wish that Andrew Garfield could have done more. It's just so unfortunate that he didn't do more. So as of now, it's just like this is a great first movie, and I really truly love this movie. So that's all I can say about the first Amazing Spider-Man, and I'll get into Amazing Spider-Man 2, and my thoughts are not going to be what you think they are. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Tell me what you think down below of the Amazing Spider-Man, and stay tuned for Amazing Spider-Man 2 review coming up.